Welcome back to the Quotive Corner. Glad you're here for this one, because today's quote is the kind that sounds almost mathematical in its simplicity, but lands in the middle of one of the most contested debates in modern society. So, buckle up! Now, I need to be upfront about the attribution here, because it's a little complicated, and that's actually part of what makes this episode interesting. The quote is widely attributed to Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn, and goes like this: "Human beings are born with different capacities. If they are free, they are not equal. And if they are equal, they are not free." Here's the honest version of the sourcing. This exact sentence doesn't appear to be traceable to a specific verified text of Solzhenitsyn's. What is documented is a speech he gave in France in September 1993 at a memorial to the Vendée Uprising, a moment in French history where tens of thousands of people were massacred by their own revolutionary government in the name of liberty, equality, and fraternity. In that speech, Solzhenitsyn argued plainly that liberty and equality are mutually exclusive forces in society, that one, by its nature, undermines the other. The quote, as most people know it, appears to be a condensed paraphrase of that idea, which then spread widely online. So, the wording is uncertain, but the idea is genuinely and verifiably his. We'll treat it accordingly, and the idea is worth treating carefully, because this is not a comfortable quote. It's going to push back on something. Depending on where you're standing politically, it may push back hard. That's fine. That's the point of this show. So, who was Solzhenitsyn? The short version: he was a Russian novelist, historian, and dissident, one of the most important literary voices of the 20th century. He survived World War II, cancer, and 11 years in the Soviet Gulag, the network of prison labor camps that the Soviet Union used to silence, punish, and destroy anyone deemed a threat to the state. His book, The Gulag Archipelago, published in 1973, documented that system in devastating detail, and it shook the Western world. He was stripped of his Soviet citizenship and expelled from the country in 1974. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1970. He eventually returned to Russia in 1994 after the Soviet collapse. He was, by any measure, a man who had paid for his convictions at a price most of us will never have to imagine. That context matters enormously when you encounter this quote. This is not a politician scoring points or a pundit being provocative. This is someone who watched firsthand what happens when a government attempts to manufacture equality through force, and what it costs in human lives and human freedom. So, the argument. The logic of the quote is almost geometric. Human beings are not born identical. We differ in ability, temperament, circumstance, drive, health, opportunity. These differences are real. If people are genuinely free to apply their different capacities in different ways and to different degrees, the outcomes will be unequal. Some will produce more, achieve more, accumulate more. That's not a design flaw. It's the natural result of freedom meeting diversity. The other side of the equation is equally stark. If you want equal outcomes, not just equal opportunity, but actual equality of result, you have to constrain freedom. You have to limit what people can earn, keep, build, or become. You have to apply force to close the gaps that freedom opens. And history, including the history Solzhenitsyn lived inside, shows that this tends to go very badly. Now, I want to be honest about where this quote gets complicated, because taken at face value, it can be, and frequently is, used as a blunt instrument to shut down any conversation about inequality. And I think that's too easy, and frankly not what Solzhenitsyn was arguing. The quote says nothing about equal dignity. It says nothing about equal treatment under the law. It says nothing about whether a society has any obligation to its most vulnerable members. Solzhenitsyn was not making the case that inequality is always just, or that outcomes don't matter, or that the gap between the fortunate and the desperate is simply the natural order and we should all shrug and move on. That would be a very selective reading of a man who spent his life defending the dignity of ordinary human beings crushed by an indifferent system. What he was arguing, specifically in the context of the French Revolution and the Soviet experiment, is that the project of forcing equality through state power tends to destroy the very freedom it claims to be liberating. That when equality becomes the supreme value, enforced from above, what you usually end up with isn't equality. It's a different kind of hierarchy, with different people at the top and the same coercion underneath. We've sat with this kind of tension before. The idea that two values we hold dear can be genuinely in conflict with each other. When we looked at Adam Smith's observation about mercy and justice, we found that two good principles can undermine each other when poorly balanced. Solzhenitsyn is making a structurally similar argument. Freedom and equality are both real goods, but they pull against each other. Pretending otherwise doesn't resolve the tension. It just hides it until it explodes. And that's probably the most enduring insight in this quote, regardless of where you land politically. Because if you're honest, you can see the tension everywhere. Every time a society debates redistribution, regulation, opportunity, and outcome, it's wrestling with exactly this. How much freedom do we accept in order to reduce inequality? How much enforced equality are we willing to accept before it starts costing us something essential? There's no clean answer. Anyone who tells you there is on either side is selling something. What Solzhenitsyn offers isn't a policy prescription. He offers a warning rooted in enormous personal cost. He watched the Soviet Union promise perfect equality and deliver oppression. He watched the French Revolution promise liberation and deliver the guillotine. He was deeply skeptical of any ideology, left or right, that believed it had found the final answer to how human society should be arranged. And maybe that's the takeaway that holds regardless of your politics. Be suspicious of certainty on questions this complex. The relationship between freedom and equality is genuinely hard. It deserves more than a slogan. On a banner or a bumper sticker, or for that matter, a quote card on social media. It deserves exactly what we try to do here. Slow down. Think it through. Hold the tension without rushing to resolve it. Thanks for spending a few minutes here at the Quotive Corner. If this one gave you something worth sitting with or arguing about, share it with someone who isn't afraid of a hard question. As always, wisdom isn't in the quote, it's in the reflection. I look forward to discussing another quote with you in the next episode.